Hello, welcome. My name's Sue Riddlestone, and I'm acting as an informal chair for this session, which is a webinar to introduce you to the tools that you can use to make your building materials more sustainable. And building materials form a huge part of our environmental impact and perhaps often overlooked, but you'll hear today in the seminar just how important they are and what you can do about it. So our speakers today include Robert Reinhardt, who works for UNEP and has led much of this work on the Eco Innovation Project. He's a sustainable business consultant and expert strategist in the circular economy and driving sustainable business models in organisations. Then we're going to hear from Samantha Kumarasena from the National Clean Production Centre in Sri Lanka. Samantha has been CEO since 2015 with more than 20 years experience in building and performance evaluation of industry and an important member of the Environmental Management System Certification Scheme at the Sri Lanka Standards Institute. Then we hear from Domingo Fernando from the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Centre, who's working as an engineer at the National Clean Production Centre with a background in chemical engineering and has worked on practical implementation of the project in Sri Lanka. Then we'll hear from Stuart Muir, who's a senior consultant at my organisation, Bioregional. He's an environmental chemist who has extensive experience in energy efficiency, renewables and carbon reporting, and he manages projects relating to improving the sustainability of product ranges and supply chain practice, covering building materials and consumer products. We're also joined by Bettina Heller from UNEP, who coordinates UNEP's Eco Innovation Portfolio and leading on projects coordinating the production of the Eco Innovation supplements. So this webinar is for you to hear more about the project in terms of the background to why we worked on it, the tool that you can use, and then real life case studies of how it was actually applied in companies in Sri Lanka. And then we have a 1 hour seminar, and the last 20 minutes or so will be a chance for you to ask questions and for us all to discuss this. So without further ado, I will hand over to Robert Reinhardt, who is going to give us the global context and introduction to the SAICM project. Robert, over to you.
Many thanks, and welcome from my end as well. I will just share my screen if that is okay for my slides. Right, I'm hoping that you're all able to see my screen. Great. I take the silence as a no. Well, as a yes, actually, sorry. So warm welcome from my end as well. Thank you very much for joining us today for the launch webinar of the Eco Innovation Buildings Material Supplement. As already said by Sue, my name is Robert, working at the United Nations Environment Programme, and I'm also part of the SAICM project. I will go into a bit more details what we actually mean by SAICM. And yeah, very, very much excited to give you a bit of an overview on the global context and introduction of the project in which that supplement was actually developed in. I would also like to acknowledge the excellent work that was undertaken by Bioregional in designing the supplement, as well as our pilot implementation partner on the ground in Sri Lanka, the National Cleaner Production Centre of Sri Lanka. And you will certainly hear from both of these organizations later on during the webinar. So let us dive right in. I'm hoping here we go. The project that the supplement was developed in is titled Global Best Practices on Emerging Chemical Policy Issues of Concern under SAICM. SAICM stands for the Strategic Approach for International Chemicals Management. The project itself, as you see on the left-hand side on the screen, is essentially focusing on two emerging policy issues. One of them is being lead in paint, and the other chemicals in products. And both of them have really generated particular environmental and health challenges, and therefore clearly they're one of these emerging policy issues that the project is addressing. There's also a third component, which is really focusing on knowledge management, the need for information exchange, but also certainly for strategic planning to ensure a coordinated and concerted action on all of these emerging policy issues. The project is almost coming to an end. So as you see on the right-hand side, by next month, June, the project is finalized. We had a total budget of $8.2 million from the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, and certainly also the project is contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, namely goal number 3, good health and well-being, as well as goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. Briefly about the different components. So as I said in the beginning, we have this one component on chemicals and products, and certainly the eco-innovation supplement for building materials was developed within that component too, which is really aiming to look at life cycle management of chemicals that are present in products. And in addition, that component is indeed focusing on 3 different sectors, building products being certainly one of them, but we also looked at the toys and electronic sectors to really better understand how we can minimize the adverse effects of these chemicals of concern on both the environment as well as on human health. Under the key outputs of the project, the idea is really to develop, and certainly the eco-innovation supplement for building materials is such a tool and guidance. So the idea really is, under these outputs to come up with new tools and guidance that essentially aim to reduce the use of chemicals of concern in these 3 sectors, while at the same time, that output is also aiming to train and support government, but also value chain actors to trial and adopt new guidance and tools. And on the training part, I think we will hear a bit more towards the end of the webinar today, but essentially the activities under this project really include an analysis of the existing landscape, as well as tools and approaches to understand how we can track and address chemicals of concerns in the building materials sector, while also exploring opportunities to advance the sector towards circularity. I'll put a link here on the slide where we have a lot of different information, articles, news regarding that component. I will also post that in the chat once I'm done with my brief presentation. So please do highly encourage you to check out the website, as there's a lot of useful information on that website. So before I finalize, just briefly, what I wanted to highlight is that at UNEP, we are following what we call a value chain approach. So as I said before, chemicals of concern are really contained in everyday products. And certainly, I think we're all aware here in this call, they can have harmful impacts on human health and the environment. And while these impacts, in fact, often occur during, for instance, the product use or the end of life and as part of the life cycle, it's quite important to also understand the decisions that can influence the product ingredients, which certainly will happen further upstream in the value chain. So therefore, the action to address really chemicals of concerns meaningfully need to consider the entire value chain, and therefore impactful interventions need to be made at upstream. So really at the design and manufacturing part of the value chain to really understand how we can minimize impacts on human health and the environment from chemical pollution. One last point on the slide, as you see here with the 4 different icons that we have on the slide, the eco-innovation supplement for the building materials sector was developed under the sustainable business model icon or guidance thematic focus, I would almost say. So the idea is really to come up with circular business model innovations to really understand how we can really change business practices to include sustainability, value chain thinking, and circularity to come up with more circular and sustainable business models in the future. And yeah, maybe just one last point on the eco-innovation methodology. And I mean, we will all see certainly when you have a look at the supplement, but the idea is really that we want in particular support SMEs in developing countries to understand how to not only develop, but also diversify their sustainable business models and thus also reduce the impacts of chemicals in their products. One quick last slide to something that I wanted to highlight as well is that as part of the SAICM project or the Jeff SAICM project, we established a website which we call the SAICM Knowledge Management Platform. So the link is here on the slide, saicmknowledge.org. This site is essentially really almost like a one-stop shop where you find all the guidance and tools that were developed as part of the project. We often publish news or articles or specific events. So again, I highly encourage you to visit the website to stay tuned on what is happening this year. And on that note, we did 4 communities of practice, which unfortunately already ended by the end of last year. However, I'm quite excited to announce there's a new community of practice that is being rolled out throughout this year on chemicals and waste management. And they will in fact host a number of discussions in this year on, for instance, chemical issues of concern, capacity building, understanding not only chemicals in the 3 sectors that I mentioned, but we also want to look beyond other sectors. And certainly that will be done through engaging with a variety of stakeholders, so academics, NGOs, international organizations, but certainly also the private sector, consumers, and citizens. And yeah, as I said, I'm kindly inviting you to please visit the website, have a look what is really happening throughout this year. And on the final note, I would also mention that while certainly the project is ending next month, the access to the information and on these emerging policy issues will stay on the website. And at UNEP, we're also planning to further ensure sustainability of the project results, such as, for instance, the implementation of the guidance and tools in other countries, following the example of these pilot project. And on that note, many thanks for giving me the opportunity to briefly present. I hope that was not too quick. And I would now like to hand over, I believe, to Mr. Samantha Kumerasena, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the National Cleaner Production Center in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. So let me go ahead with a brief outline about what we have done in contributing to this manual. So Stuart, can you share the screen? So because seems not possible from my end. Okay. So would you please? Yeah. Thank you very much. National Cleaner Production Center engaged in eco-innovation right from the beginning with the UNEP. So basically, when the initial manual was prepared, NCPC was invited to contribute as an industry partner. So then, before 2013, we engaged in this activity, particularly myself. Then, in the first pilot application by UNEP in 2013, that is the first global application, NCPC undertook the application in the agri-food sector in Sri Lanka. So then it was a successful project. So having built up our capacity on eco-innovation, then subsequently we implemented eco-innovation in dairy sector industries under the consumer information project that we implemented with UNEP. Then in this project for the construction sector supply chain, also we engage with 12 companies in implementing eco-innovation in the construction sector supply chain. So National Cleaner Production Center was established by UNIDO in 2002. And then among the other activities, so then NCPC has been the leading sustainability solution provider in Sri Lanka with our whole scope of work. So NCPC experienced in eco-innovation also, as I mentioned, during last 10 years. So then, would you please move to the next slide? Sorry. Okay, thank you. So then, UNEP Eco-Innovation Pilot and Supplement. So under that, under the project, we have conducted several activities. Tech study on use of chemicals of concern in Sri Lanka. In fact, this study was carried out to identify products which have most impacts in terms of chemicals of concern. In fact, these products had significant sales volumes, as well as they were using chemicals of concern with their manufacturing process. Next, we had this workshop with the industry in Sri Lanka on use stocks tool for chemicals assessment. We introduced the use stocks tool to local industries to help them to identify chemicals of concern that are used in the manufacturing process. Next, to produce the supplement on building materials to accompany UNEP Innovation Manual. So based on our experience, we provided the feedback to UNEP and Bioregional to further fine-tune the building materials supplement of the Eco-Innovation Manual. Then, based on the building material supplement and training were conducted to the local industry stakeholders by Bioregional. So all industry participants with NCPC engaged in this training with Bioregional. NCPC also provided further training to the companies and other stakeholders on eco-innovation process. Then we embarked on the pilot on eco-innovation methodology with 12 companies in the building material sector. We were able to recruit 12 companies from this sector for the pilot project on implement eco-innovation, where we were able to create more sustainable business models for the companies. Then more detailed support was given for 6 companies to implement the project. Then supplement launch and dissemination also. Now we are in fact closely coordinating with the Bioregional and UNEP to support wherever possible. Then some of the case studies that we have developed from these pilot projects in the companies also has been incorporated to this eco-innovation manual. Sorry, eco-innovation building and construction sector supplement. Okay, so would you please move to the next slide? Let me give a very brief outline about the companies participated in the pilot project. So we have the product portfolio of these companies span the entire scope of the construction sector, starting with the cement and concrete and going towards finished products such as paints and coatings and roofing products. Hence, we can say these products sustainably cover the building material sector. Even during a time where the construction sector in Sri Lanka was facing many challenges, these companies came forward to engage with us throughout this project, which is highly commendable. So those 12 companies making the products ranging from cement blocks, ready-mix concrete, then wall pre-coating, then tile products, then the paint and coatings, as well as then other binders, wood coatings, so then waterproofing chemicals, as well as cleaning chemicals. So therefore, it's a wide spectrum of products manufactured by them. So therefore, eco-innovation proved to be applicable in whatever such industry sectors with the support of this construction sector supplement. So with that, I would like to hand over to Stuart to continue the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samantha. Bioregional, we have been working with NCPC Sri Lanka on this project, and we were leading on the creation of the supplements. And so we produced the eco-innovation supplement, which is meant to provide practical guidance for the implementation of eco-innovation in this sector. So if you're not familiar with the eco-innovation process, it follows a sort of technology and sector agnostic manual and a set of templates to be able to take SMEs through this process of developing new business models. So the eco-innovation manual and template sit on the website, and this supplement follows one on metals, one on agri-food, chemicals, and more recently textiles and electronics supplements have been produced for eco-innovation. So the supplement that we've produced, it contains sector-specific guidance. So we've looked at aspects such as chemical management, chemical inventorying, and substitution, as alongside other aspects that complement this strategy, such as improving circularity and measuring embodied carbon. And these are parts of the eco-innovation process that look at identifying hotspots and developing new business models to mitigate these aspects. So the eco-innovation process, this process really aims to enable for SMEs to take advantage of the aspects shown on the right. So accessing new and expanding markets, increasing productivity and technical capacity, increasing profitability for themselves among the value chain, attracting more investments and staying ahead of standards and regulations. So this will SMEs implementing the process, this will help them answer the demand for the increasing demand for consumers that we're seeing for sustainable products, accessing markets such as public procurement that might have sustainable public procurement criteria in place for them, and aspects where SMEs don't necessarily have the support in things like staying ahead of regulations or finding ways to reduce costs related to sustainability. So eco-innovation is a broad process that can be used to improve sustainability in a company's goods or services, but also their internal or manufacturing processes, or the markets they aim to play in, or aspects to do with their organizational structure. So the need for the supplements in the building materials sector, it's probably less well known, the aspect of chemicals behind circularity and carbon in this sector, but buildings and construction is, according to the Global Chemicals Outlook 2 report, the largest end market for chemicals, ahead of electronics, household, agriculture at $695 billion. So there is certainly a massive chemical impact of the construction sector. The construction sector is growing at 3.5% a year, and its associated chemical sector is also growing. Obviously, we're seeing great expansion, and that's reflected in how the sector is responsible for around 11% of global CO2 emissions, and every year 100 billion tonnes of construction waste go to are produced each year, with around 35% of these going to landfill. And some of the other important aspects that's really emphasise the need for a building materials sector supplement is that buildings and construction as a sector is considered to be conservative, and there's a low level of data sharing and transparency in the value chain. In terms of the chemicals aspects that are more specific to products and chemicals themselves, and these are some of the specific aspects we delve into the supplements. Compounds like flame retardants and phthalates, we know these are problematic in things like insulation and flooring. Seeing certain chemicals of concern in plastics, and potentially things like heavy metals in recycled plastic feedstocks. Paints, adhesives and sealants certainly have a significant chemical footprint, and this can be quite varied depending on the varied formulation of these, but there's certainly great scope to improve the sustainability and the chemical safety of these products. Things like furniture and wood board have some of the hotspots related to formaldehyde emissions, and also seeing aspects such as asbestos, which is obviously regulated in a number of regions, but not everywhere, and still a problem in some places. So on the right is the main chemical impacts we've looked to address as part of the supplements. So in terms of the eco-innovation process, and I'm not going to go through this in full detail, but again, if you're not familiar, this follows 6 main sections. So it's aimed at the perspective of a service provider, who is usually a sustainability consultant working with an SME organisation. And so the eco-innovation process gives a set of tools and templates to prepare and find suitable target companies who will have both the appetite and the technical capability and the knowledge to implement eco-innovation. And the second phase being the set strategy phase, which involves a preliminary assessment of the company and their potential to implement eco-innovation, but also capturing their current business model and collecting a certain amount of data about themselves, but also their industry. So things like collecting the sustainability threats and opportunities of the specific sector they are in. The third section is setting a new business model. So this involves a more detailed assessment of the company, looking at their operations, capturing some operational data, capturing more perhaps intangibles about their expertise in the company and where this lies. And this third section is concerned with generating new ideas for business models and how these could be implemented in the company. The fourth sector is more of a practical section of building a roadmap. So this involves building a roadmap of operational level projects that can sit under the business model to embed sustainability within the company operation. And then the last two sections are to implement these projects and to conduct the necessary review and amendment of these projects. So in the supplement, we've used an example of a fictional company to develop the process. We used the fictional company GFC Building Supplies. We were keen to be able to have a case study of a company that could look at a number of different building materials, as the sector is very broad. So this enabled us to look at things like paints and concrete and timber products in the examples we showed. And so this company, in the process we took them through this, we looked at how the process can help them address key sustainability hotspots in different products and chemicals, and also looking at how a carbon and circularity strategy can sit alongside a chemical strategy. The examples look to show how the company can diversify its services and differentiate products within the market, which in some products in the building sector, there can be some sort of real saturation with certain products, looking at how they could access new markets through things like eco-labeling or achieving public procurement criteria. And we looked also at some of the circular business models that are being seen in projects at the moment and how they could implement some of those. And also things like diversifying their workforce, including increasing gender balance in the workforce and addressing certain social aspects of things like the effect on the local community of production, and how a company can have a full value chain influence, not just improving their products, but improving the practices of companies upstream in the value chain in particular, but also downstream with some end of life processes or use processes. So in terms of circular business models, the ones at the top here, circular supplies, resource recovery, product life extension, sharing platforms, and products as a service. These are business models that have been outlined before by Accenture on some of the emerging thinking in making products and services more circular. So we looked at a number of these as ways we could show examples and go through the eco-innovation process with these. So we looked at how GFC Building Supply could look at practical projects such as product life extension. So that might involve subscription-based business models, looking at extended producer responsibility and extended product stewardship, where there's more take back and recovery of materials, which can improve circularity, but also mitigate chemical releases to the environment if companies are able to take materials back. Looked at how design for dismantling is hugely important in the building materials sector. So that could be for individual products such as plasterboard, but at the buildings level as well, and that enables reduced chemical use as well as modularity. We looked at ways that resource recovery could be put into action by GFC Building Supplies, and so services around collection, dismantling, and liaising with value chain partners on that. And also looking at some of the innovative products that are being seen. So we are seeing things like really good application of green chemistry principles, where companies are making things like no added formaldehyde glues that are looking at kind of biomimicry principles rather than using the more conventional approaches of fossil-based adhesives that use formaldehyde and so use of safer substitutes in these products. So we've also profiled some case studies. So Rota DC is a deconstruction company that we profiled in the supplements, based in Belgium, and Genge makers who have really pioneered plastics recycling and acting on that waste stream as a way of improving circularity, but also mitigating some of the chemical effects of plastics in the environment. So that's our sort of theory from the eco-innovation manual we've produced. I'll now hand over to Damindu, who can report on the practical application of this in the pilot in Sri Lanka. So Damindu, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Is it possible to get control of the screen?
I thought you were a presenter, but maybe not. Let me try that again.
If not, maybe you can move to the slides as I request. Is that okay?
Yeah, I can move.
Okay, thank you so much. Can we go to the next slide? Here we can see the entire life cycle of a construction supply chain, starting off from sourcing of the raw materials for production, and then bringing it into the manufacturing facilities. And afterwards, it is being consumed in the construction sector for construction purposes. And afterwards, what happens is there's a series of things happening. There can be maintenance works going on, reuse. And of course, there might be refurbishments or recycling of some of the elements of the buildings or constructions that have been taken place. And of course, finally, there can be a disposal phase as well. So as you can see, building materials, it's only, let's say, in the first beginning of the life cycle, but it does have a big impact when you consider the whole life cycle as well. As we have identified, there are several hotspots that we identified throughout the life cycle. Stuart, if you can move forward. The beauty of eco-innovation is it's actually looking at the whole value chain, not only at the, let's say, specific element that you are concentrated on, but it's actually looking at the whole value chain on the whole. And it's really important that this approach is taken in eco-innovation, because if we only think about the products that we produce or whatever the actions that we do, it will have a let's say, adverse impact later on in the value chain. So it's important that we take a look at the whole value chain as a whole. And of course, some of the hotspots that we identify in the building materials sector, we found that there can be sand sourcing issues or raw material sourcing issues where unsustainable sand sourcing is carried out in Sri Lanka. And of course, during the manufacturing phase of most of the products, there is an element of waste generated. And of course, when it comes to the paints and coatings industry, there are solvents that are being used in the industry, and of course, other chemicals that are being used in the industry that has an adverse impact for the workers who are working in the factories, as well as the people who will be using the relevant products later on in the value chain. Moving on to the user phase, of course, as I mentioned, one of the major issues that we identified in the value chain in Sri Lanka specifically is the low awareness of the users.
Damindu, can others not hear Damindu? Was it just
Yeah, apologies.
You're back. Thank you.
Connection issue. Apologies for that. As I was saying, there is a tendency for workers in Sri Lanka to not to take a lot of safety precautions when using chemicals or paints or whatever the construction chemicals that they are using. So that can have an adverse effect on them, especially since they will be getting exposed to the chemicals on a daily basis based on their live food. And the effects of these things will only take place maybe 10, 15, 20 years later. And of course, there are other aspects as well where people tend to overuse some chemicals or products because we lack the awareness of how much of quantity is required in these products for our purpose. And of course, when it comes to demolition waste, not a lot of circularity is in Sri Lanka. Because of that reason, a lot of the demolition waste, a lot of the demolition waste gets disposed. Can we move to the next slide, Stuart? Based on our experience with the 12 companies that we worked on, I mainly selected few areas where we identify sustainability hotspot. As I mentioned, in the ready-mix concrete industry, unsustainable sourcing of raw materials was there, especially river sand. And of course, lack of circularity initiatives were there. Because of that reason, a lot of demolition waste was also getting accumulated. For ready-mix industry, some of the initiatives or new ideas that came up, of course, we can substitute certain raw materials such as river sand, which is a very valuable and a scarce raw material, with something like, let's say, coal fly ash. That substitution will, of course, reduce the burden on the environment because on one hand, coal fly ash is waste generated in the power generation. And on the other hand, sand requirement will be reduced by incorporating fly ash into concrete. And of course, let's say we are circularity, we are implementing circular business models such as taking in demolition waste and repurposing it into their product, such as, let's say, in concrete manufacturing, as well as other products like cement bricks. So those kind of initiatives were very innovative, I would say, and very timely in order to address the sustainability hotspots that were identified. And of course, moving on to the paints and coatings industry. As I mentioned earlier, also we identified there is a tendency to use chemicals with adverse effects in the manufacturing process, and by moving to a more inherently safer product, it would of course benefit all parties at the same time. The worker environment will also be much more safer if we are using more inherently safer ingredients in the production process, as well as during the or rather the user phase when people are applying paints or tile grouts or whatever the product. If we are using an inherently safer product, that would ensure the safety of the safety and well-being of the consumer as well as the workforce. And of course, moving on to the coatings and adhesives industry as well. One of the other aspects that we found was the lack of awareness in people who are engaged in, let's say, masonry or applying paint as painters. These people do not have the relevant awareness of the adverse effects the products that they are dealing with will have on them later on years. So another aspect is one of the companies that we worked with, Union Chemicals, they are producing a binder, and this binder is sometimes procured by small-time paint manufacturers as well. So they do not have the relevant expertise or the knowledge on how the relevant materials needs to be handled. Because of that reason, we can always engage with the downstream supply chain of the relevant products to share the knowledge or the awareness with them, to raise their awareness on the adverse effects these chemicals in these paints or the products that they are using in a daily basis might have on them in the later years. Moving on to the next slide, Stuart. Some of the lessons learned, of course, implementing eco-innovation in companies is not an easy task. Some of the lessons that we learned, we can share with the other participants here. The top management support is crucial for the success of eco-innovation implementation. Without the top management support, we cannot proceed much further other than doing a preliminary assessment. We can give them the options or suggest new business model. But if we are truly to implement eco-innovation, the top management needs to take a stand and towards going for a more sustainable business model. So top management support is critical, and of course it is important to consider the sustainability of the full life cycle or the value chain of a product. Usually when we think about our company or manufacturing facility, we tend to think about the gate-to-gate boundary from that manufacturing facility. But when we consider eco-innovation and its approach, we need to consider the whole life cycle or the value chain of a certain product in order to identify or minimize the adverse impacts our products might have in other parts of the value chain. And of course, having strong and cordial partnerships with corporates is a key factor, because we need to have a good understanding between the corporates and ourselves as the consultants in order to succeed in implementing co-innovation. And of course, as a country, Sri Lanka do rely quite a lot on imported raw materials. And because of that reason, there are certain aspects in Sri Lanka, in companies in Sri Lanka specifically, that they are unable to control a lot. They do not have a lot of leverage in addressing certain hotspot in the upstream supply chain because of a lot of the material are being imported into the country. And of course, you need to be flexible with companies. Especially we were undertaking this project in a very challenging period of COVID, and of course with the economic situation in Sri Lanka as well. So we were very flexible and continuously had discussions with the corporates in order to how best they can eliminate the hotspots and bring in a new business model rather than force a certain business model upon them. So having that flexibility is very important as well, and having that cordial relationship with the corporates help us to fine-tune our business models further. And of course, moving on to the success stories, paints and coating industries, they are shifting towards much safer products in their portfolio. Especially going towards water-based paints rather than solvent-based paints. And as a result, some of the companies were able to get eco-label certifications. And of course, recycling of demolition and other types of waste have made concrete industry less reliant on virgin raw materials, which is a big win in terms of sustainability. Moving on, increased engagement with the downstream supply chain also increases the awareness among stakeholders, thereby increasing or rather helping them to have a longevity of their careers with respect to, let's say, painting and things like that. And of course, streamlining production processes has helped companies to identify certain areas where waste are generated, and that has helped them to reduce waste as well. That is all from me, and over to you, Sue, to continue.
Thank you, Daminda, and thank you to the team. You've definitely made the case for us. For those on the call, if you could think about any questions you have and post them in the chat, or please raise your hands. I've definitely got a question to ask the team. But just before that, I'd just like to reflect that the team have made the environmental case. So, you know, this huge impact of building materials, 11% of CO2 emissions, 1/3 wasted, which is really bad for business. It's money down the drain as well as an environmental impact. There are some serious chemicals of concern involved, and building materials are the largest end market for chemicals. And it's really important to take a business approach, and we heard some, and think about the whole value chain, and it's about transforming our businesses and the sector to future-proof it. And also you highlighted the importance of people and the need to raise awareness, and how participating in the project meant people then had a greater awareness and took action, with some success stories that you heard there from Daminda. As I say, please post your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you have any. But my question is perhaps to Robert or Stuart. If I'm watching this webinar and representing a small company or an industry network for a region, how would I, because obviously in this big project, there was some support from the team, but how would I go about using this tool and joining this community of practice if I'm perhaps watching this webinar on catch up? Is this one for you, Robert?
I would think so. I was just looking at Stuart if he would like to go first. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Many thanks, Sue. First of all, what I will do, I will post in the chat a link that is very helpful. So we have, as Stuart also kindly elaborate on as well. So certainly we have the supplement, which should not be seen as a standalone document. So it's, as the name says, a supplement for the building material sector. Previously, we have also published other supplements for electronics sector or the textile sector, but all of these are based on what we call the eco-innovation implementation methodology. And the link I just posted here, you will find that manual on that website. So essentially, you should really start looking at the theoretical part of the manual and then also looking at the supplement, how this is being complemented with. So I think that really is quite a nice elaboration on, right, if I'm an SME and I want to start engaging to become more sustainable and more circular, these are the different steps I should be taking. So the eco-innovation implementation in a nutshell could also be considered as a sustainable business model innovation approach. So you really start at the macro level, understanding what is going on around me as a company, what does the political environment look like in my country, what about legal, social, technological issues. And once that is all then clear, you then look more internally at your own organization saying, right, let us maybe understand what kind of hotspots do we potentially have in our life cycle. And based on an understanding of these hotspots, what kind of new business models should we maybe come up with to address those? So it's a really strategic step-by-step approach to understand how can we really become more sustainable in the future. Regarding the communities of practice, I would highly encourage to visit the website that I think I also posted in the chat already. There's a contact landing page as well, so you feel free to send us an email to understand more when these communities of practice events will be happening. But surely we always post regularly on the news or news events section of the website if there's anything coming up. So please always do visit that. And otherwise, send us an email as well. We're always happy to support in that regard and connect the dots. I hope that was clarifying. So
Yeah,
many thanks.
That's a good answer. And so that's the website is unep.ecoinnovation. So if people go there,
Indeed, yeah,
they can find the resources they need and make all those links. And yeah, from our experience at Bioregional on working on looking again and innovating on the business models, it's actually quite fun. So just encourage everyone to get started, because it is all about future-proofing your business and our economy. Robert, do you have any closing words? Or
I mean, from my end, just want to thank you all for participating, and I really hope that the information that you gained today was useful. As I said, in terms of follow-ups and also thinking beyond the project span of this GEF, the Global Environment Facility, SAICM, the Strategic Approach International Chemicals Management Project. Please do feel free to send us an email if there's any questions or comments. I would also assume that the slides will be shared with you afterwards. I've posted in the chat the supplement where you can find it. And yeah, I think we all just very much hope that this comes in useful and will all help you to embark on that journey to become more sustainable. So I think it's really timely relevant that we're putting this information and guidance and tool out there, of course, free to use for everyone to really understand how they can embark on that journey. Thank you so much.
thank you, Robert. Thank you to you and to all of our speakers. Looks like we may have one more question coming in before we finish. But I'll just like to thank Mr. Samantha Kumarasina, Damindu Fernando, and Stuart Muir for their contributions today, and wish you all a lovely day and success in transforming your building materials to become more sustainable, everybody. So thank you in the chat there. Okay, thank you very much.